Shall we start then?
Okay.
So, I'd like to hand over now to Graham Chester for part 2.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. You may have picked up from what Philip said that "look at the pictures" is a line from that poem, "Home is So Sad." But it seemed very appropriate to purloin that title for my talk, which is precisely to try and look at some of Larkin's pictures, either pictures he was given or pictures he bought. What's underneath is a cake. And it's a cake that I learnt earlier this week was made by the daughter of one of Larkin Society's members, whose article had been accepted by our journal about Larkin. And in order to mark that acceptance, the daughter decided to bake a family cake. And here it is, Larkin. It's irresistible for me at this as a starting slide, because you know those pictures they used to have in windows where it says, 1 and 6 or something like this, a reduction of 6p, and you have these two round, they have the word look, and then in the middle of the O's you have a couple of the dark spots. So it looks as though this cake is obsessively looking. I'd like to begin really by thanking Hannah Willits and Sam Robinson for focusing my mind on Larkin and his pictures. We were talking earlier on about the exhibition in the White Gallery, and it was Sam who raised some questions about Larkin and his attitude towards pictures, and it set me thinking. Not a lot has been done in terms of research on Larkin's pictures, and it's perhaps understandable. So, looking at Larkin pictures, I'm going to begin by Larkin looking at one of his own pictures, a gift from a Hull multi-talented individual called Ted Tarling, who a lot of people in Hull still remember as a jazz musician. But he was an artist. This is one of his gouache. He was a poet, and he indeed ran a poetry magazine for not many issues, 8 or 9 issues, called Wave, which was almost a parallel to one that the Marvell Press started back in the mid-1950s. So, and he gave Larkin, he gave him 2 of his gouache. This is the second one. It is early 1985, and of course that's the year that Larkin died in December. This is probably January. I'll come back to this. So the question is raised, well, how many pictures did Larkin have? Well, we think it's over 40. The Larkin Society, after Monica Jones died in 2001, acquired some of the objects that were left in 105 Newland Park. And they're all catalogued, they're all in an inventory. These are just the first 2 pages of 39 pages, and even that excludes individual items on tea towels, for example, or Larkin's socks, or even more Larkin's ties, of which there are over 200. So there's a lot of Larkinalia. So the first 2 pages are devoted to framed pictures, and I'm taking that as a definition of Larkin's pictures. So over 40 sounds sounds like a collection. I'm not sure how many pictures you've got in your houses. But if you analyse it a bit more closely, 22 of those were what I'm calling, a little bit dismissively, tourist prints. So the print of, an example, St John's College, Oxford, the print of Dr Johnson's birthplace in Lichfield, with which the Larkin family had close connections. So there are quite a few like that. There's one which was given to him by Betjeman, and it was described by Betjeman. This is, I think, is an ink drawing, or ink print rather, of whole docks. And Larkin must have had doubts about it, because he took it to the Ferrens Art Gallery, talked to Leslie Dunn, who was Douglas Dunn's first wife, and she died, of course, tragically. And she was a bit of an expert on these things, and she was able to tell him that it was really Glasgow. So it's not clear whether he ever broke the news to Betjeman, but anyway. And then, amongst those 22 tourist prints, or reproductions. So he had reproductions of various sizes of Goya, Vermeer, Stubbs, Manet, Millet, Renoir. And this is the Renoir print. It's Spring in Chateau. And it was a large print. This is the picture of the inside Pearson Park flat. You see the light coming in through those high windows on the left as the attic, sloping ceiling. And right behind him is indeed the Renoir print. In pride of place, above the gas fire. And this would, too, I think, will be a self-portrait on a timer. He's quite fond of doing that. And, well, Larkin used the phrase specially chosen junk to describe what he found in his home. Philip quoted the difficulty Larkin confessed to have actually making a home. So he dismissed it as carefully chosen junk. What fascinates me about this picture is the kind of self-assuredness of the figure of Larkin himself, and all the kind of detritus lying around him, and the open drawers on the left. And there's another picture, I think, from the same shoot, if you can call it that, where there's another set of drawers which are left open. It's this, he's quite unabashed by demonstrating his own casualness as to the order of his room. But nevertheless, that's what he does with his large print of Springtime in Chateau. It occupies pride of place. So if we carry on with what these 40 framed pictures consist of, 5 of them are framed photographs. One of Ted Hughes that he kept in the downstairs lavatory. 7 were watercolours of gouache, 4 of which were gifts to Larkin. And only 5 of the 40 were oils. I suppose that's fairly predictable in a way. Oils can be less easily obtained. Just looking at that rough register of Larkin's pictures, it's not difficult to confirm that Larkin was not really a collector of fine art. But he wasn't a collector of much else either. I think he'd probably, his main focus was on tea towels and Beatrix Potter ceramics. Wasn't really a collector of books. So it's quite difficult to call him a bibliophile in the true sense. He once suggested he didn't really need to be, since he was a librarian and there were a couple of million books around the corner. What he did collect also was jazz records. He's very specific in what his needs were, especially in his early, even his teenage years. But if you look at what was left in 105 Newland Park, there are hundreds of jazz LPs, not necessarily collected, but more review copies, given that he spent many years as a jazz critic for the Telegraph and the Guardian. He rarely mentions artists in his writings. On one occasion, famous occasion, he dismisses Picasso as one of the demonic modernist trio, Pound, Picasso and Parker. He means Charlie Parker. According to Larkin, these are destroyers of pleasure in poetry or painting and jazz. And he gives a reason. They forgot their audience and became more and more obsessed with the material of their craft. That dismissal provoked quite a reaction, and it confirmed in lots of people's eyes that Larkin as a cultural Philistine. But of course, Larkin was actually generally a cultured man. He knew artists, local artists, belonged to the artist circle, and people in the art world. And he did exchange views on artists with particularly Monica Jones in the correspondence. After one visit to the Royal Academy in London, he hazarded the view that Constable was too muddy. I'm not sure what level of muddiness is acceptable, but anyway, he was too muddy. And there's plenty of evidence that Larkin had a strong visual sense and an openness to visual inspiration. John Osborne, our local Larkin expert, not the angry young man, although he'd be quite pleased to be called an angry young man at this time of life. But anyway, he's written 2 wonderful books on Larkin. And he comes to Larkin's defence, those people who say that Larkin had no feeling for the visual arts. He states Larkin was possibly the most art-conscious British poet of the mid-century. And then he goes on to link some of his most famous poems with art forms. Painting, the card players, that's a kind of Dutch tavern scene. He was very fond of, Larkin was fond of Bruegel and the Dutch school generally. But that, I think, is probably the only Larkin poem directly inspired by a painting. But there's sculpture, Arundel Tomb, architecture, church-going, the building, illuminated manuscripts, less obviously, Long Line Days, photography, wonderful poem on lines of a young lady's photograph album, posters in Sunny Prescott Inn, billboards, Essential Beauty, there's one for billboard on distemper, movies, Born Yesterday was the title of a film, Faith Healing, it's derived from an American film, cinema newsreels and TV documentaries. So all these are not what you would call high, not all of them because of the painting, not necessarily high art, but they show Larkin extremely receptive to the visual. And of course, as Philip said, he's a very keen photographer and a skilled photographer. Philip's working on Larkin's doodles at the moment. They're not any old doodles, they're quite nicely crafted doodles. So he clearly did have a visual sense at some point. Let's go back to the few oils and the gouache. It seems that Larkin only began to contemplate doing some serious purchasing of art in 1970. So, you know, what would he would have been, what, 48? And I'm not sure why why he waited until then. It may be that he was beginning to feel financially more comfortable. He just got the contract with Oxford University Press to produce the Oxford Book of 20th Century English Verse, and had won grants in order to pursue that at All Souls College, Oxford. So 1970. Now, Maeve Brennan, she recalls in her memoir, the Philip Larkin I knew, not the other Philip Larkins, but the Philip Larkin I knew. She recalls the immense pleasure that the hanging of his first art purchase gave to him, and indeed to Maeve, who was there when it happened. Now, she situates this in 1963, and that's a mistake. It's not the first mistake or misfortune to be attached to the painting. Anyway, she goes on. I was only too eager to see what he'd paid £750 for. An enormous extravagance in 1963. If you put the inflation measurer on that, it's the equivalent of about 22,000 now. So he spent £750, enormous extravagance. I thought he'd taken leave of his senses. In my experience, ordinary people then did not splash out that amount on a little-known painting. Fair point. Now, what was this painting? Well, it was a 19th century pastoral idyll of, quote, a young girl and small child observing sheep, end of quote. Now, this is Maeve's description. It's not a title. The more you think about it, it's a bit of an odd description. I mean, people tend sheep and they watch over sheep. But observing sheep, curious description. You can't imagine the young girl saying to the little child, let's go out and observe some sheep. And as far as I know, there isn't an observer's book of sheep. There's a gap in the market there, anybody interested. The painter, we do know, his name was Thomas Falcon Marshall, and he was a well-known painter of pastoral idylls and been exhibited in the Royal Academy exhibition more than once. And you might ask, well, why am I not showing it to you? It was stolen from 105 Newland Park 2 years after Larkin died, and has never been recovered. I haven't approached Humberside Police yet to see whether it's a closed case, but it might. But it's difficult to tell them what they're looking for because nobody knows what it looks like. Maeve, in her memoir, says she's pleased that she asked a friend, and that friend was Ted Tarling, the person I mentioned earlier. She asked him to take a photograph of it hanging in Newland Park. Maeve distinctly remembers that it was in both residences, it was above the fireplace. So it had replaced Renoir's Springtime in Chateau in Pearson Park, and it had been put in the same prominent position in Newland Park. So when I read that, I thought, well, it's fine, we just need to find that photograph. But now the photograph has gone missing. You go to the History Centre into Maeve Brennan's deposit there of her papers, and they can't find anything that remotely resembles it. rather pathetically, and don't adjust your glasses, as it were. This is the nearest we've got to a clue as to what it looked like. This blurry picture comes from a film. It was a film taken by somebody who used to be the director of the Audiovisual Centre in the university, Mike Bowen, a close jazz friend of Larkin's. And within the month or two of Larkin's death, he took it upon himself to make this little film about jazz and Larkin. And part of that film is a kind of I am a camera sequence where the camera goes round 105 Newland Park. And I've been tracking this, hoping that at some point or other you'd have a full view of some of Larkin's pictures. No, it's all at a slightly different level. And this is a screenshot, not a very good one, of the picture hanging above the hearth. I took Dave Brennan's word literally, and what you have in the front of the, I think the cards sent to Monica after Larkin's death, the sympathy cards. You can't see much of this painting, so you realise why I'm a little bit hesitant going down to Amberside Police on Clough Road and thinking there is Larkin's Stolen Sheep. As I said, Maeve was mistaken about the date. It was 1970, not 1963, when he paid £750. The inflation measure means that now it would be worth £9,000. So a lot of things obviously happened between 63 and 70. In early November of that year, 1970, Larkin travelled from Oxford, where he was staying at Whole Souls, preparing for his, what he called his Oxbow. Philip had a dog. I've got my grandson who I don't think will bark with 5 minutes to go, but is an equivalent. Now, he went from Oxford to London to visit an art dealer. Quite difficult to find out which art dealer. I've been in touch with a couple. And a day or two after, he tells his mother in a letter that he looked at all his pictures and bought two pictures, dating from Victorian days, but certainly at substantial prices. These are Larkin's words. They both had sheep on. Right, so they're the clue. Both got sheep. And I suspect the dealer thought I was the Yorkshire wool merchant. 2 days later, in another letter, he describes his purchase as an act of folly. And he describes the experience as interesting, though expensive. The second painting, Figure with Sheep by Peter Le Cave, escaped the burglar. Either that, or he thought it not worth stealing, and he might have a point. This is Figure with Sheep, where you have a very modest subject matter and a fantastically extravagant frame. Figure with sheep. We'll come back to that in a moment. A week or two before this visit to London, Larkin had been corresponding with Monica Jones about art purchases. Right? It's quite rare in their extended correspondence. And he says to her, "Have you sent for L'Immortel?" the title of this painting. I suppose it's rather dear. I mean, I'm imagining that there's a kind of printed catalogue and you send for the painting. I suppose it's rather dear. But compared with this Actaeon thing, is actually Titian's Death of Actaeon, which was going for sale in late 1970, early 1971, and actually went to auction, and the auction, the price was up to 1.6 million. It was rescued for the nation. It was one of those. But this great masterpiece, Larkin calls it this Actaeon thing. He said, I mean, one won't get 1 million times more enjoyment out of the Actaeon. L'Immortel is very nice. Remember the sky. Remember the sky. They'd obviously seen it. But that interesting equation, rather crude equation, from the point of view of enjoyment, paying whatever the price was for this was a much better value than paying 1.6 million for the Actaeon thing. It's partly because Larkin, whatever he was writing, whether it's correspondence or poetry or novels or jazz criticism or literary criticism, he was always extremely faithful to what he's written about elsewhere, called the pleasure principle. He was always keen to please the reader or the correspondent. And that was part of the problem, he said, with Pound and Picasso and Parker. He had no time for modernists. I mentioned Beatrix Potter just now, and at one point, rather extravagantly, he said that he's read The Tale of Gloucester, which is a masterpiece, so much better than Proust and James Joyce. So, anyway, after 3 weeks after he bought his 2 sheep paintings, he writes again to Monica. After a visit to somebody called Philip Reef, he's an American sociologist who was visiting fellow at Oxford, and Reef had shown him a lovely Linnell, John Linnell, with another a Victorian painter. And the name he attributes to the painting is Harvesters in Gathering Storm. This may not be exactly it, because he did 2 or 3 paintings with a similar title. One was a sketch for another, which is now in the Met in New York. So he'd seen this painting at Philip Reef's and writes, much better than, excuse me, my pissy little things. I envy him. This is the picture of figure with sheep. You see, it is a little thing. When I came to collect it because it was being kept here in the treasure house. When I came to collect it, I had no idea of the size. You get the variety. So I actually parked in the loading bay in case. So it felt a bit absurd collecting this about the size of a postcard. Yeah. Right. So the disaffection with his purchases. This is just 3 weeks later when he calls it my pissy little things. It didn't take long to show itself. Going back to the L'Immortel, which we can only assume Monica did buy. It was found in 105 Newland Park, and towards the end of his life, Monica moved in with him in Newland Park, and this is, one assumes, and it is only assumption, that she took it with her. when it was discovered in Newland Park, it hadn't replaced the stolen painting above the hearth. In fact, it was found, according to the inventory, in the top of a wardrobe in an upstairs bedroom. So Monica clearly had dismissed her purchase as well. Just one last thing about this painting. It goes under the name, or had gone under the name, more understandable name, to my view, as Fisherman's Widow. You see the sea in the background. It's clearly what the French call a cimetière marin. When the name changed and why, I simply don't know. More research needs to be done, as they say. During my internet search, what fascinated me, there's a report on one website that this actual painting, I know it's here, this actual painting, slightly bigger than the other one, was found hanging in the room occupied, rented by Mary Kelly, one of Jack the Ripper's victims. So when you look at it now, you feel a little bit spooky about it. Of course, there are so many conspiracy theories about Jack the Ripper that I urge a degree of caution. The final painting that Larkin bought is this one, Jenny's Calf. And you'll be able to see it in the exhibition. It's against a small painting. And he bought it 7 months after splashing out on his sheep paintings. His account of buying this painting is in a letter to Monica, and it shows a certain trauma. He says, "This afternoon, I finally went to see the Elwells in Beverley Art Gallery, and very nice they are too. There are one or two of the old Beverley Arms kitchen. You remember the one that used to hang in there. Also on show was an exhibition by Friends of the Minster, which I looked round at a brisk trot. The oils were foul. Why can't amateurs have a sense of harmony? The watercolours better. Just as I was bounding out, I saw a drab little picture high up, oils. It didn't look bad. A label on the back said Jenny's Shop, 1950, it should have been Jenny's Cafe. Lillian Watson, £2, in a clear old-fashioned hand. I went down to the library, hesitated, shied, cleared out. Then in the porch, saw that this was the last day. So I went back and bought it, cluttering myself up with junk. But it seemed so humble and modest and much better than the others, which were much more expensive, that I fell. A very drab Holly picture. So there's a sense of once bitten, twice shy. He's not going to pay a fortune. But the cost enjoyment equation comes to the fore again. It's a bargain. It's not only is it better than the rest, it's cheaper than the rest. It's kind of some ideal scenario. But if you go to the White Gallery now and see it hanging, you'll see there's still a little red purchase sticker on the frame. So you could only draw one's conclusions from that. Finally, and I will press on now, let's move on to some gouache pieces by Ted Tarling. Here's one, it's called Bowlby's Row. It's in the exhibition. It's one of two paintings that Tarling gave to Larkin. And that gift is actually the end of, if you go down Clough Road, those of you who know Hull, across the bridge, there's a little stub of a road, and it's called Ferry Lane. And it joins Stoneferry. So what you get now, instead of that, is Pets R Us and KFC, I think. And Tarling had said to him, Ted Tarling grandparents lived in Bowlby's Row. These are the front walls of what was a row of terrace houses. And he himself was born in Lorraine Street, just behind that. Larkin gives a rare analysis of his reaction and why this painting appealed to him. This is, I don't expect you to read this, I shall read it out, but this is the direct copy of the letter from Larkin to Ted Tarling. I'm at a loss for words. This is in August, 1984. I'm at a loss for words to say how much I like your picture and how generous it is of you to give it to me. If I try, I shall probably say the wrong things, but its meticulous melancholy speaks straight to me. Just remind you what its meticulous melancholy speaks straight to me. It seems more than Stone Ferry. Seems more than Hull. It's, well, I was about to say life itself, but that would be overdoing it. But it's very much life as I see it anyway. I love the sky and the railings and the rising line of the path behind them. How I wish there could be a Tarling exhibition so that I could see them all. What strikes Larkin, and apart from the sky, and he said the same thing about L'Immortel, remember, and looking at the end of high windows, or here, we know how Larkin was attracted by the emptiness of the sky. What attracts him here is this general melancholy, this meticulous melancholy. Picks up with the wistfulness and the plangency of Home is So Sad. Also connects with the disappearance of humans. It's this attics cleared of humans. He likes the darkness and the drabness and the dullness. But it's controlled artistic triumph. It's this meticulousness. And of course, the other thing that appealed to him is it's devoid of any transactional worries. So it's a gift to him. He appreciates the generosity. I think he likes the fact that it's urban yet simple. So you go right to the heart of Larkin's own aesthetics. One last painting, and it's not by Larkin, because in that letter, or perhaps in a separate letter, he's saying that he was having his portrait painted by Humphrey Ocean for the National Portrait Gallery, and that he'd shown Ocean Tarling's paintings, and he said to Tarling that Ocean was very impressed by them, keen to pass on that praise. This is what Ocean ended up with from a room in Newland Park. And you might say that what Ocean has picked up is the melancholy, the dullness, the kind of slight dull pastel colours that he uses, a slight haze almost. So there we are in Oxford, going back to 1970. A.L. Rouse, the famous Elizabethan historian and writer on Shakespeare, like several others, says Andrew Motion, he objected to Larkin's half-genuine, half-mocking disapproval of high art and academic matters. Rouse said he was falling over backwards to be Philistine. Or, to put it more kindly, keen to recognise the beauty in the ordinary, keen to find poetry in the everyday, not the sublime or the great classical narratives, keen to puncture pretentiousness. That's one reason why he loved Hull and Beverley and East Yorkshire, and one reason why he shied away from London and its literary scene. And of course, after the folly of his sheep purchases, he never went again near to the London art market. Thank you. Right. Happy to take any questions, as Philip was.
Graham, can I just ask about the artist of the stolen painting?
Yes.
Who did you say that was?
Thomas Falcon Marshall.
Is anything known about him and any other paintings that he
Oh
did?
yes, if you go onto the internet and press, Thomas Falcon Marshall and press images, you get page after page after page. And there's only one that half fits the description given by Maeve, but that went a different route entirely.
And were his paintings suitably valuable?
They always have fetched a reasonable price. He's not international star by any means, but he's certainly saleable now. If you look at the recent auctions, they fetch a few thousand. Yeah, but it's odd that it's just completely disappeared. And I'm not sure anybody.
How did he decorate his office at work? Did he have artworks there?
He had a couple of Oxford prints, I think. They're still there, aren't they, in his office? But I don't think there are any other artworks. Jeff, there were some of the.
Yeah, a photo of Guy the gorilla on his desk.
Oh, Guy, yeah. Well, that's a good example of not being terribly interested in high art. Yeah. And if you go next door but 4, I think, to 105 Newlyn Park, there is a massive gorilla in somebody's front garden. One of these, tall as this ceiling, next door. That must be a Larkin reference. But,
You mentioned his own doodles. I wondered what they were of and what they're like.
Most of them, I'm on risky ground here, Phil knows a lot more than I do, most of them were found in the correspondence to his mother. And they depict Larkin himself and his mother as well. And you get them in letters to Monica, you get them in the margins of books sometime. There's one I remember, I forget which one it is. I forget the book it was, but there was the phrase, with the seal of a loving kiss. And he depicts in the margin a seal, because that was one of his animals. They're nearly all animals.
Mainly seals.
Sorry?
Mainly seals.
Mainly seals, yeah. So, and some of them are very funny. I mean, in his letters home from Oxford, they're more representative, aren't they? Representational, I should say, yeah. Depicting himself in various scrapes, of feeling sorry for himself.
There's some sort of more sort of like completed drawings that he did in early letters. He had a friend called Jim Sutton from Coventry who was an artist, and a lot of those letters they exchanged just after they sort of Larkin had gone down from Oxford were reflecting artistic themes, and there's a couple of fabulous ones where he's drawn jazz musicians, where there's more full drawings than the little doodles that he would just write on very quickly.
Any landscape?
No.
Especially
No. They're very funny, some of them. I mean, there's
the ocean painting now.
it's in the National Portrait Gallery. It's not always on display, but you can order a reproduction of it online if you want.
Did you think it was okay?
I think so. I don't think we said much about it. It is a bit dull to me, but Ocean says that he never enjoyed us sitting more than with Larkin, because Larkin, well, he's famously so witty and funny that it was a joy to be sat with him in a room for that time.
How old was Larkin in that book?
It was 1984, so 62, 63, yeah. But he was already ill, as Philip said, and it got steadily worse.
Somebody on the walk the other day asked me where Jenny's Cafe was, and I didn't know the answer to that. Do you
I think it's Bond Street.
Bond Street.
Bond Street, yeah. Yeah.
It was quite a well-to-do establishment.
Well,
wasn't it?
read the article by G. Weston. It's actually quite difficult to imagine where it is now. I think there's a chimney in the background, which was that the whole brewery, or yeah. So that's how you locate it. And then what I take to be a bomb site in the foreground.
Which is still a bomb site, 75 years.
Oh, it's a car. Well, no, it's a car park. Come on.
It's still undeveloped. Sure.
Undeveloped, yeah. It's where the old institute used to be. Yeah, they got bombed, and but it's where you found ladies who lunched, I think, is the expression that Mo Barker used. Yeah. Doesn't look like it, does it? I mean, it looks like Smoky Joe's Cafe. Just round the corner from Carmichael's, I guess, isn't it? Right. Well, thank you very much for being so patient.
Absolutely fascinating hearing all this, and it's been a real pleasure to have you here today. And thank you again for all you have done involved with the Home So Sad exhibition. And it's been a real pleasure, and it's been very interesting to have this dialogue between Sam Robinson, Kyung Lee, and yourselves, and Philip Larkin Society, and to have access to all the fantastic collection and include it in the exhibition. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. There's one last thing. I mean, I would urge you to keep on going back and having a look at the exhibition, because it does. You see different things every time you go. For those people Sam gave a lovely talk in here on the day it opened, which was quite a revelation to me anyway. One of the things that stuck in my mind was that if you go around, all those, Philip mentioned it, all the paintings or works of art, they're not all paintings, really depict the same scene, the scene as viewed from that flat in Welbourne Court, is it? Yeah. So there's, and some of them are on corrugated cardboard, isn't it? And like the one that Philip showed in towards the end of his talk. What Sam Robinson said was that the way he painted those was that he got the original photograph, which I think are around. This is the photograph from which all the other paintings derive. It's an estate agent's photograph. He had that on an easel next to where he was painting, and he had it 90 degrees, right? It wasn't like that, which you'd expect. It was like 90 degrees. And his painting was done likewise at 90 degrees. So he was painting a landscape painting, but in portrait orientation. And the reason, he said, is that it makes you concentrate on texture and colour and the visual experience rather than accuracy. And I was telling this to an old friend Julian will know him, Tony Dennison, who's a local artist who does a lot of paintings of buildings. And I was amazed that he was doing it like this. He's a retired art teacher, and he said, well, for my students, I turned it 180 degrees and asked his students to paint their still lifes upside down, but for precisely the same reasons. He didn't want them to be distracted by photographic fidelity, as it were. That's it. So I've learned a lot through this partnership, and that's just one example. Thank you very much.